Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. We love to take these deep dives
Yeah.
into really interesting books and ideas. And today we are talking about self-knowledge,
Right?
how our beliefs shape our reality,
Yes.
which is a fascinating topic.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be using for this deep dive chapters 7 and 8 from Maria Konikova's book, Mastermind,
Okay.
which is all about the brilliant mind of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah?
And, it's so interesting because even Sherlock's creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle,
Right.
could be fooled by his own beliefs.
Yeah, what's so interesting is that Conan Doyle, this guy who gave us the ultimate logician in Sherlock Holmes,
Right.
was himself a firm believer in fairies.
Yeah.
So, that this really highlights how our own biases can really trip us up.
It's kind of ironic
It is, yeah.
when you think about it. But before we get to Conan Doyle's fairy fascination,
Okay.
let's talk about one of Watson's classic blunders.
Okay.
Good old Dr. Watson. Remember the walking stick incident in The Hound of the Baskervilles?
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
Yeah, he's trying to impress Holmes by,
Right.
deducing all these details about the visitor, Dr. Mortimer.
Yeah.
Just from his walking stick, he's looking at the size.
Yeah. He observes the inscription.
Yeah, CCH.
And he assumes that means he's part of like a local hunt.
The country practitioner, he says.
Yeah.
Right? Watson always so eager to prove himself,
Of course.
but his deductions are always a little bit off.
Yeah, a little bit.
So what's the real lesson here for us?
Well, I think it's a fantastic example of how these unconscious biases can really kind of trip us up.
Yeah.
Watson creates this whole image of Dr. Mortimer in his head, like successful elderly medical man, he calls him,
Right.
country practitioner,
Right.
all based on his own preconceived notions
Uh-huh.
about what a doctor should be like.
Right.
So those assumptions that, those color everything he sees.
So some of his observations may be accurate,
Right.
but because he didn't start with a clear mind,
His deductions are flawed.
Yeah, it's like if you were trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, but you didn't first sort the pieces by color
Oh, interesting.
or edge type. You might be forcing pieces together that don't actually fit
Uh-huh.
simply because you're so focused on completing this picture in your head.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So instead of letting the pieces guide us, we're trying to force them into our predetermined narrative.
Yes, exactly.
So what does Holmes do differently? Because obviously he sees through all this.
Well, Holmes being aware of this pitfall, he takes a step back and he takes in the whole scene.
Okay.
Right? He observes, first of all, the missing visiting card,
Yeah.
which suggests that maybe the visitor's a little absent-minded.
Oh, right.
And then he examines the stick itself, meticulously,
Yeah.
even using a magnifying glass
Right.
to uncover these details that Watson totally missed.
Like those teeth marks.
Yes.
I mean, that's a clear sign
Right.
that the doctor had a dog.
Not just any dog, a spaniel, he says. A spaniel. Yeah, Watson completely overlooked those.
He did, and they were plainly visible.
Yeah.
But Watson's focus on confirming this preconceived notion of Dr. Mortimer blinded him to this crucial evidence.
Right.
He didn't just observe.
Yeah.
He interpreted through the lens of his assumptions.
Right.
Something we all do.
Totally.
And being aware of it is the first step to kind of avoiding these pitfalls.
And this is where it gets really interesting to me.
Okay.
Because Holmes, instead of leaping to conclusions,
Right.
he takes a break.
Yes.
Right? His famous three-pipe problem.
Right.
To let the information settle.
Exactly.
So what can we learn from that besides investing in a good pipe?
Well, Holmes uses the pipe analogy, but we can achieve similar kind of mental breaks
Okay.
through activities like listening to music, taking a walk, or even just pausing to reflect.
Okay.
The key is to create space for your mind to kind of wander and make new associations.
Yeah.
To look at the information from different angles.
So it's not about just gathering information. It's about giving ourselves the time and space
Yes.
to process it effectively.
Exactly.
This feels very relevant in our current world of constant information overload.
It is. We're bombarded with information from every direction.
Right. Yeah.
And it's so easy to fall into the trap of just reacting
Yeah.
rather than responding.
Right.
So this deliberate pause,
Yeah.
that Holmesian mental break,
Right.
allows us to step back and analyze the information
Right.
before we jump to conclusions.
And wouldn't that help us avoid making those snap judgments
Exactly.
based on biases?
Yeah.
It's like hitting the pause button
Yeah.
on our automatic assumptions.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this whole idea of a mental pause,
Yeah.
It reminds me of something that Konnikova mentions,
What?
this idea of a decision diary.
Oh, yeah.
And it's inspired by this woman, Amy,
Uh-huh.
who kept a diary to track her migraines. And, it seems like such a powerful tool
Yeah,
for self-awareness.
it is. It is.
What'd you say?
Yeah, imagine keeping like a journal
Okay.
where after every decision you make,
Okay.
you jot down your observations, your thoughts,
Uh-huh.
any doubts you had,
Yeah.
the action you took, and the outcome.
It's like having this personal record of our
Right.
thought process.
Yes.
A way to track,
Yeah.
these subtle biases that
Yeah.
we might not even realize
Well,
are
it's all for you.
influencing our choices.
Exactly. And then you go back.
Yeah, and the real magic happens when you reread those entries.
Yeah.
Patterns start to emerge.
Oh, wow.
You might notice that you consistently overestimate your abilities
Mm-hmm.
in certain situations, or maybe you're more risk averse when you're tired.
Oh, interesting.
These insights can be so valuable
Great.
for improving your decision making.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's almost like we become our own detectives.
Like analyzing the evidence of our past choices
Exactly.
to make better ones in the future.
Yes, yes.
It's that self-reflection piece
Yeah.
that seems so crucial.
Absolutely. And it's something that, even the great Sherlock Holmes' creator,
Okay.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle,
Right.
could have benefited from.
Oh, here we go.
Remember the Cottingley fairies?
Yes. The case where the creator of the Master of Logic was
Mhm.
himself taken in
Yeah.
by a hoax.
By a clever hoax.
What kind of twist?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 1920, Conan Doyle encountered these photographs that seemingly depicted real fairies. And they were taken by these two young cousins, Elsie and Francis.
Okay.
And these images caused a huge stir
I bet.
at the time. And Conan Doyle, already a believer in the supernatural,
Right.
was determined to authenticate them.
So he went full-on Sherlock mode.
He did. He consulted photography experts.
Okay.
He examined the original negatives.
Wow.
He even had the girls take more pictures with new cameras and plates.
Oh.
He was incredibly thorough in verifying
Right.
that the photos themselves weren't tampered with.
Right. So the photos themselves were real.
Yeah, but his investigation kind of missed a crucial element, wouldn't you say?
I think I see where you're going with this.
Okay.
He was so focused on proving the authenticity of the photos
Right.
that he never stopped to consider that the fairies themselves
Yes,
could be fake.
exactly. He never asked that question, what if the subjects of these photos are staged?
Right.
If he had applied that Holmesian logic,
Right.
he might have realized that creating fake fairies
Yeah.
would be a lot simpler than faking photographs.
Yeah.
That could fool experts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about taking that step back.
Yes.
And questioning even the seemingly obvious.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much we want to believe something
I know.
can make us blind to
Yeah.
other explanations.
Yeah, it's like we look back at those photos now.
Right.
It seems so clear.
It does.
Right? And that's because our current knowledge and context
Uh-huh.
influences how we perceive information.
Okay.
Back then, photography was still relatively new
Right.
and complex,
Right.
Manipulating photos convincingly was not easy.
Uh-huh.
So the perceived authenticity of these photos
Right.
held a lot of weight.
Plus, it was the time of all these groundbreaking scientific discoveries,
Right.
like X-rays, microbes, things that were once unseen and thought impossible were
Right.
suddenly being revealed.
It was like a time of expanding possibilities.
Right.
Yeah.
So people were more open
Yeah.
to the idea of the unseen.
And the unexplained, exactly. Spiritualism was also gaining popularity.
Yeah.
Even respected scientists were investigating psychic phenomena.
Yeah.
So for Conan Doyle, the fairies weren't such a leap,
Right. But this idea that our preconceived notions
Yeah.
shape how we see the world.
It applies to all of us.
Right.
You know?
So how do we avoid falling into these traps
That's the question.
of belief and bias?
Right. How do we become more like Holmes and less like, even Conan Doyle in this case?
How do we do it?
Well, Konnikova suggests cultivating what she calls the hunter mindset.
Okay.
It's about being constantly alert and adaptable,
Okay.
knowing when to engage, when to withdraw,
Mm-hmm.
and always being willing to adjust your approach based on the situation.
That's a great analogy. Can you break down some of the
Ah.
key elements of this hunter mindset?
Absolutely.
It feels very practical.
It is. So first we have ever-ready attention.
Okay.
So like a skilled hunter,
Mm-hmm.
you're not on high alert constantly,
Okay.
but you're attuned to your surroundings.
Okay.
conserving your mental energy for those moments that really matter.
Okay.
You learn to filter out distractions
Right.
and focus on those important cues.
So it's about being present and mindful.
Exactly.
Not just overwhelmed by everything that's
Yes.
coming at us.
That's right.
Okay, then there's environmental appropriateness.
Yes, you wouldn't hunt a fox.
Right.
Same way you would hunt a tiger.
Right.
The hunter adapts their approach
Right.
based on the specific prey and environment.
So we should tailor our interactions and strategies based on the specific context.
Precise.
And the people involved.
It's about reading the room,
Uh-huh.
understanding the dynamics at play,
Yeah.
and adjusting your communication style accordingly.
Like Holmes.
Yeah.
He uses all these different tactics
Right.
to get information from different characters.
Depending on who he's dealing with.
It's amazing how he can be so charming and then witty and then intimidating,
Right.
all depending on who he's talking to.
Exactly. He's a master.
What other qualities are part of this hunter mindset?
Well, adaptability is crucial.
Okay.
A hunter needs to be able to change course when the unexpected happens.
Right.
Think about Holmes's decision in The Adventure of the Abbey Grange.
Okay.
He chooses not to turn in the suspect
Uh-huh.
because he realizes that the man's actions,
Right.
while technically illegal, were morally justified.
So he adapted to the situation,
He did.
choosing compassion
Yes,
over rigid adherence to the law.
exactly.
It's about being flexible,
It is?
not being tied
Yeah.
to a fixed plan when circumstances change.
It is.
And equally important is acknowledging limitations.
Yes. A good hunter knows their weaknesses and compensates for them.
Okay.
They're not afraid to ask for help or adjust their strategy.
So self-awareness is key here.
Absolutely.
Recognizing what we're not good at.
Yeah.
And finding ways to either improve or work around those limitations.
Yes. It's about being honest with ourselves.
Right. And in our hyper-connected world,
Yeah.
cultivating quiet is essential.
Yes. Just like a hunter needs those moments of solitude to reflect and recharge.
Uh-huh.
We need to create space for quiet contemplation, away from the constant barrage of information.
It's about putting down the phone,
Exactly.
stepping away from the screen, and just allowing ourselves to think.
Precisely.
Okay, and finally.
Constant vigilance.
Okay.
Even when things seem routine or predictable, a good hunter never lets their guard down.
Right.
Complacency can be dangerous.
Yeah.
We need to maintain that critical eye,
Right.
avoid slipping into autopilot even when we're dealing with familiar situations.
This hunter mindset is so powerful.
It is.
It's about being present, adaptable, self-aware,
Yeah.
and always ready to learn.
Always learning.
It's about honing those observation skills.
Yes.
So that we can see the world more clearly and make more informed decisions.
It is. And that awareness extends to understanding how our own minds work.
Right.
How our beliefs can influence our perceptions.
Yeah.
And this leads us to a fascinating area of research in psychology.
Okay.
The work of Carol Dweck and Walter Mischel, which explores how our mindsets shape our learning and performance. Yeah, so this idea of mindset being so influential.
So can you remind us about what Dweck and Mischel call incremental versus entity thinking?
Yeah, think of it this way.
Okay.
If you have an incremental mindset, you believe that intelligence is like a muscle, something you can strengthen through effort and practice.
Okay.
You see failure as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Okay.
But if you have an entity mindset, you see intelligence as fixed.
Oh.
You're either born smart or you're not.
Okay.
And failure becomes evidence of your limitations.
Right, like a confirmation.
Yeah, a confirmation of what you believe you can't do.
So an incremental thinker embraces challenges.
Yes.
Whereas an entity thinker might shy away from them.
Exactly. Dweck's research shows that people with these incremental mindsets tend to be more resilient.
Okay.
They see these obstacles as chances to develop their abilities.
Right, makes sense.
Entity thinkers, on the other hand, might give up more easily when things get tough.
Yeah.
Believing that their efforts won't make a difference.
It's almost like these mindsets become self-fulfilling prophecies.
They do.
If you believe you can't improve, you're less likely to put in the work.
Yeah, what's fascinating is that recent neurological studies are showing how these mindsets actually affect our brain activity.
Really?
Yeah, when incremental thinkers make mistakes, they show increased activity in the areas of the brain associated with error detection and correction.
Wow, so they're
actively engaged in learning from their mistakes.
Their brains are wired for
Yes.
growth and adaptation.
Oh, exactly.
So what about people with those entity mindsets?
Interestingly, they show less activity in those same areas.
Really?
It suggests that they may be less likely to process those errors in a way that leads to improvement.
Wow, it's like their belief that intelligence is fixed
Right.
prevents their brains from fully engaging in the learning process.
It does. It really does.
This is such a powerful concept.
It is.
If we can change our beliefs, we can literally change how our brains respond to challenges.
And that's incredibly empowering, isn't it?
It is.
It means that we're not limited by some predetermined notion of intelligence.
Right.
We have the potential to develop our abilities throughout our lives, no matter our starting point.
This makes me think about all the times I've told myself, like, I'm just not good at that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm starting to see how, like, these limiting beliefs might have held me back.
They do. They really do.
From achieving things that I thought were beyond my reach.
It's a common experience.
Yeah.
And Konnikova gives several examples of people who found success later in life, often in unexpected fields.
Right.
You've got Richard Feynman, this Nobel Prize-winning physicist, who also became an accomplished artist.
Wow.
Grandma Moses, who didn't start painting until her late 70s and went on to become a celebrated folk artist.
It's never too late to learn and grow.
It's not, no matter what we've told ourselves in the past. That's right.
The brain is incredibly adaptable,
Yeah.
capable of amazing transformations.
So after this deep dive, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway is this. We have far more control over our minds and our abilities than we often realize.
Okay.
By cultivating that mindful, curious, adaptable hunter mindset we've been discussing, we can overcome these biases, challenge those limiting beliefs, and unlock our potential for growth and learning.
It's like we've been given this incredible toolkit
We have.
for navigating the world more effectively, making better decisions, and understanding ourselves on a deeper level.
And like any good toolkit, it takes practice and effort to master those tools.
Totally, but the rewards are worth it.
Absolutely.
We've covered so much in this episode.
We have.
From Watson's fumbles with observation to the Cottingley fairies and the power of mindset.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
It really has. It's given me so much to think about
Me too.
and apply to my own life. And I hope it has for our listeners as well.
I hope so. And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked about the hunter mindset and this importance of cultivating quiet.
Yeah.
But in a world that is so driven by technology, how do we balance those principles with this constant flow of information?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How do we hone our observation skills in the digital age?
Right.
Ensuring that we're not just overwhelmed,
Yeah.
but empowered by all the information at our fingertips.
It's a challenge.
It is.
We all face.
Yeah, it's a challenge we all face.
Yeah.
And one worth exploring further. So keep those minds curious.
Yes.
And until next time, happy hunting.